something that you see in these readings that we will be seeing throughout this week is how there's this light of beauty that just shines. It gets brighter and brighter, but in the midst of that, it also reveals the darkness. And you have this confrontation that maybe was kind of under the surface for a while, and now it's really starting to become manifest. You see this especially in Judas, and you see how he starts on this path, and the darkness gets darker. Notice how he was thinking at this moment. He speaks as a pragmatist. It sounds very logical, but there's an underlying current of deception that's there. So one of the things that he's struggling with is with authenticity. He says very sensibly, "This oil that you just wasted on my master, you could have sold it for a whole year of someone working hard labor in construction." Just think about that, like the whole year of your spouse working. How much does that cost? And imagine that they were just to buy perfume, oil, and then waste it in one shot. Especially in our American sensibility, we would look and say, that is such a waste. And yet notice how in the midst of his reason, there's something under that that's not exactly authentic. John says here, he said this, not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief and held the money bag and used to steal the contributions. So little by little, and it probably wasn't a giant thing at first, but he wanted his perks. He didn't want to really live this life of discipleship, of giving all to the Lord. He didn't give all of his heart. You see that when there is the confrontation in John 6, in which you have the bread of life discourse, and you have Jesus after those who walk away, and Peter says, "Lord, to where should we go? You have the words of everlasting life." And Jesus says a very interesting thing there, saying, I forget exactly the wording, but it was something along the lines of, he acknowledges that, but then he also says, "But one of you is a devil." Or he says something, I forget exactly don't quote me on it, read it for yourself. But there's this moment there in which there's this kind of light that's pointing to the fact that Judas didn't fully believe in the Eucharist. He didn't fully believe that Jesus would give his flesh and blood, even though he kept following, maybe because of the perks that he was getting, maybe that sense of affirmation of, wow, I'm important. Maybe it was, well, I have an opportunity to do all of these things to look nice in people's eyes and also to get what I want when I want it by having authority over the contributions. I'm sure Jesus knew this as well. Remember how he knows what's in the hearts of everyone. And so he permitted this to happen. Ultimately, that sadness of, be careful what you ask for. Judas is going down this road. And this starts getting stronger because he ultimately will sell his friend for money. See how it starts small, little things, but then that becomes a monster of its own. And he stops being able to see who Jesus is. And just like he sees this oil in terms of just a pragmatic thing and doesn't see the action of this woman who shares this beautiful love. He's not able to understand love. And so he can't understand the one who is love. And he sees everything in economic terms. And he starts to see his own master as merely just an economic means to get a little more money to have what he wants. And going back to that idea of him not understanding the belief in the Eucharist, we also see that he didn't fully understand that Jesus Christ was Lord. Because when all of the other apostles are saying, "Is it I, Lord? Is it I, Kyrios? Is it I, Lord?" When Jesus says, "One of you will betray me," Judas doesn't say that. He says, "Is it I, Rabbi?" All the others say, "You're Lord." Judas says, "You're a teacher." Do we ever do that with God? "You give me some wisdom sometimes, Lord. You're a teacher. But if you're Lord, I have to give everything to you. If you're truly the master of all of my life." And so Judas is like, "No, just like I want autonomy over what I want when I want it, and I'm going to use this means of a money bag to be able to do that." There's also that sense of autonomy over my life by keeping the Lord at a distance and saying, "You are a great teacher. You share good things. I like that, but I'm not going to give you my whole heart." And ultimately, because he didn't give his whole heart to the Lord, little by little, someone else started to take over his heart. Remember at the Last Supper, it says, "And then Satan fully entered into him, and it was night." That experience of, as we see the beauty rising with this wonderful just action of love of Mary of Bethany, we also see this darkness rise and rise through the great tragedy of a man who, in the midst of that inauthenticity, and in allowing these areas of concupiscence to just not allow the Lord to take over, someone else took over. But even in the midst of all of that, the greatest tragedy is that Judas didn't realize that God could be merciful. Because remember, he's looking at everything in terms of economic terms, in terms of how does this profit me? So then he would look at his master and say, "Well, I won't profit my master in any sort of way because this is what I've done, so there's no hope for me." He didn't understand the dynamic of mercy that reaches down, and actually reaches down precisely because someone is in misery, is in sin, is in brokenness. And he didn't understand that. And sadly, he took his life saying, "There's no hope for me." So let's ask the Lord that as we contemplate these two ways within Scripture, we have always these two ways, the way of the just and the way of the wicked, that we can see within our own heart the mirror put before our eyes and to say, how am I like Judas? How am I like Mary of Bethany? Am I wasting time with the Lord? Am I allowing the Lord's presence to be like perfume that goes all into every nook and cranny of my heart? Or do I keep God at a distance, calling him Rabbi, saying, "Yes, I want you to walk with me, but on my terms"? And do we keep, in a sense, the money bag for ourselves, so that we aren't truly following the Lord, but we're following him to the extent that it makes us feel good, versus the extent of walking with him to the cross? Let's ask the Lord for that grace, because we can't do this on our own. we will fall and be like Judas every single time unless we allow the mercy of God to invade our heart, to cast out the one who makes it night there. And this is what the Easter mystery is all about.